Good evening, guys. So, tonight I would like to present my topic on competence to consent to search and seizure, presented by the very Morgan Page, which is me. So, first, I would like to cover what exactly is competence to consent to search or seizure. So, we know that competence is the mental capacity of an individual, their ability or power. So, to consent to a search or seizure, as a second portion, essentially is the power or ability of an individual to be able to make the decision that they are allowed to be searched or that things are allowed to be seized. This is also known as decisional competence. So, there is a process in which individuals can have what's called parens patriae, and this is basically Latin to state that the state will only be able to intervene in somebody else's life if that individual does not have the capacity or ability to make those specific decisions or to perform specific actions. So, for example, if an individual was mentally incompetent to consent to a search or seizure, the state would be able to possibly invoke parens patriae and thereby make that decision for them. Now, this falls under the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment, which I have here, presents that we are protected against unreasonable searches and seizures. Now, this means that the police have to have a warrant and they have to have probable cause. Now, voluntary consent can be given to be searched or seized from the individual. However, this still means that the police can't just say, oh, we're looking for anything and everything, and therefore we can have anything and anything we want. It has to be very specific. So they have to know what they are looking for and where they are looking for it at. So the requirements, just to recap on that, is that an individual must be proven competent by a clinical evaluation. So, if there is a suspicion that the individual, say, is mentally incompetent, then they would have to have the psychological clinician perform that evaluation to make sure that they could consent. Uh, Again, we can also have that individual give consent voluntarily. The police can perform a search and seizure if that person gives consent. So, for example, if the police pull you over and they do not have probable cause to search your car, but you say, sure, go ahead and search my car, then they can still proceed with that search and or seizure of items. Another thing that's important is that they are not required to give you that knowledge or the understanding that you have a right to refuse that search or seizure. That's only a secondary concern. Now, there was some research in the book that I would like to cover. So, first we have Kagiro. Now, Kagiro's summary for what they found was that consent was achieved because a lot of people were afraid of reprisal. They were afraid of the consequences of refusing. They also found that they had no faith in the law being followed. So they didn't trust police officers to actually do what they should do. Now, this study was based on interviews with 54 individuals that were in police reports. Second, we have Nadler. Now, Nadler found that a lot of individuals felt they couldn't refuse. They thought that refusal would be met with negative consequences and essentially would be met with the ultimatum of either accede to the request or face the consequences, which essentially showed that uncooperation was perceived as being difficult and refusing what they should accede to. Now, Nadler discovered this through Ohio in consent searches. And this was through a survey of research and compliance issues. So, as we find, research leads that people are too afraid to say no because they don't want any blowback. Now, what ends up happening from both these research is that fear does play an important role here because refusal is seen as uncooperation. Uncooperation will lead to negative consequences and police not following the law, which then leads to the, again, ultimatum of either consent to the search or incur unknown consequences for uncooperation. Now, I do also have this video here, and I really liked this video because it's a lawyer who discusses the importance of why the police need to have a valid warrant instead of just any warrant. Now, he does mention that in today's day and age, a lot of warrants tend to have flimsy reasons. However, the reasons should be valid. The police need to make sure that they're not saying they want to search for a car in a kitchen or that they're looking for something in another area that it wouldn't ever be in. Obviously, if they're searching for a car, then the warrant should list the garage or the outside property, but they can't list the whole house as looking for a car or anything like that. They have to be specific in what they're looking for, and they have to be specific in where they are looking for it at. These are very important things that they need to watch out for. He does cover quite a bit with consent to search and seizures, and I liked the depth as well as how clear and how he was able to explain in layperson's terms about the importance of this issue. Lastly, guys, I would like to go over my discussion question with you. So, my discussion question is how would you assess somebody's ability to consent to a search or seizure? And exactly what factors might you consider in determining their competence in this situation? I think it's an important factor to note that we should be understanding exactly what makes an individual able to consent to a search and or seizure because there are a lot of mental health issues these days. And I also think that with competence, it's called into question responsibility and accountability. If somebody with a mental disorder consents to a search or seizure, how valid is that search or seizure without a warrant? I think that if we press this issue, it would be important to find out exactly where that line is drawn because not only do we need to be protected as citizens, but we also need to make sure that the police are following through and doing their job. Because, on the other hand, you don't want a criminal escaping because of a small incidental. It's important to cover it from both aspects and protect all people on each end. So I would love to hear you guys' responses. I thank you and have a wonderful rest of your evening.